I talk a lot about how business relationships are like any relationship. And so I want to talk a little bit today about assumptions. So, assumptions aren't a good thing to have in any relationship. Never assume you know what's going on. Unless somebody tells you what's going on, you won't know for sure, right? Same is true with business relationships. Now, quick disclaimer, I do not mean if you're a customer and you contact a company with a problem and you don't hear anything, don't assume that, oh, they're so busy and they just can't get back to me. No, assume that they just really don't care. But for other business relationships, such as between coworkers or colleagues or between an employee and their supervisor, those sorts of business relationships, never assume anything. Because here's the thing, every human, every employee, every manager, every person working in an organization has a different set of standards. They're not you, right? So they're not going to live by your rules because they're not inside your head. They've got a different set of rules that they live by. So for you, what might seem like too long to respond to an email, for them may fall within the range of acceptable. So everyone has a range of what's acceptable, right? Both for just human behavior, behavior in others, behavior in themselves. Companies also have to think about this too when they think about their customers, of this range of what a customer is willing to accept to what they're not and what that range is, right? So with human relationships, business relationships of any kind, when you fall within that range, we're all okay with it, right? But when other people don't fall within that range of what we find acceptable, well, we get annoyed, frustrated, angry, whatever, right? Don't automatically assume that they are angry with you or ignoring you and don't think that you're worth their time or whatever it is. The problem with the human brain is that when there are silences, we fill those gaps with our own stories. If you're constantly telling yourself a story that you aren't worthy, then whenever anyone falls outside that range of acceptable behavior in your mind, then you will read that as they don't think I'm worth it. If you think that everyone else is an incompetent idiot, then whenever they don't fall within your range, you're going to say it's because they're an incompetent idiot. But neither is true. It's just that they're not falling within what your range is of acceptable behavior. Now, obviously, there are overlaps. I mean, there are some general acceptance of what acceptable behavior is, right, within society. Otherwise, we can't function as a society. But if someone takes a week longer to respond to an email than what you think is appropriate, it may have nothing to do with you or their opinion of you or anything about them. You know, it might not be a moral failing on their part. They might consider that completely acceptable, whereas to you, it's not. So don't make assumptions based on what you find acceptable or what you think you would do in that situation. Because here's the thing, you're not in that situation. So just because you think you would respond to a person's email within a day, if you were that person with their workload and dealing with the stuff that's going on in their life, maybe you would take a week to respond to. So here's the thing, never assume. You will never know what's going on inside someone's head unless they tell you. So communicate, ask. Ask them if they need another week to get back to you about something. Don't assume that they are blowing you off or that they're incompetent or whatever it is because they're not doing what you think they should be doing. No one is a mind reader. You're not. You can't know what's going on inside their mind. They're not mind readers. They don't know what you want them to do. If they did know what was going on inside your mind and what you were expecting of them, they might actually do what you think they should do, but they don't know that you want them to do it, so they're not doing it. And maybe it's just a matter of you haven't verbalized or you haven't been clear about what you expect of the other person. If someone's not getting back to you, maybe you didn't make it clear that you were waiting for a response. So don't assume that they're ungrateful or unappreciative of what you've done if you didn't clearly state next steps. So never assume that someone's words or actions or lack thereof are intentional or mean anything towards you, because chances are they probably don't. I worked with a manager once who became really annoyed that I didn't say hello to him one morning. I didn't realize that that was so important to him. I didn't work directly with him. He was not my supervisor. I was not his. I didn't realize that this was a big deal. And one morning I was incredibly busy and in the middle of a project, and I didn't stop what I was doing to say, hello, good morning, how are you? He became very annoyed by this. How was I to know that this was important to him? How was he to know that I was super busy and I wasn't just blowing him off by not saying hello, that I was legitimately busy? He wasn't reading my mind. I wasn't reading his mind. If we had both clearly communicated and said, if he had said to me, hey, I need you to say good morning to me every morning, otherwise I think there's a problem. And if I had said, hey, if I don't say good morning to you one time, it's because I'm legitimately busy, then there wouldn't have been a misunderstanding. Now, these kind of conversations don't usually happen in a workplace. So cut the assumptions and you cut down on miscommunications. Never assume that you know what's going on inside someone's head, and never fall under the assumption that you would do something differently if it had been you in that situation, because you don't know really what you would do if you were walking in their shoes, living their lives, seeing the world through their eyes. You don't know. So don't say, well, if it were me, this is what I would do. You don't know. This guy, for example, he was very insecure in his role. It was a new role. He didn't feel that he was qualified for it and felt that if anyone snubbed him in any way, that it was a judgment on his competency level. Whereas if I'm really busy, I may not say hello to you in the morning if I'm in the middle of something or in the middle of a train of thought or in the middle of a project, whatever it is, and it has nothing to do with you or my opinion of you. But this is how our human brains work. So we fill the gaps with stories, and usually with stories that we are constantly telling ourselves. So in any situation like that, where you find yourself making assumptions, ask yourself, is that really true? Or do I know if this is true? Can I prove that this is true? And if not, stop. Different people have different ways of doing things. And your way is not necessarily right, and their way isn't necessarily right, but it's your own ways of doing things. And so understanding that other people have other minds, they're not you. They're not going to do things or say things exactly the way that you do or the way that you want them to. So let it go. Ask people what they mean. Ask people to be clear, and don't make assumptions. This is where we get into trouble. So if you find yourself feeling a certain way or thinking something negatively about someone else, just take a deep breath and ask yourself, am I basing this on an assumption or on a fact? Everything in business is a relationship. Business relationships are human relationships. When you're dealing with another human, things can get messy, murky, unclear, which is why we developed language, right? Let's use that language. Let's communicate with each other using words. Now, after I learned that he really needed someone to say hello to him every morning, then I would say hello to him every morning. But I didn't know that until that was communicated to me. So once I knew that he needed that validation every morning in order to feel confident going into his job, I'm more than happy to say hello and good morning to someone every morning if that's what they need. But just because I don't need that, I shouldn't have assumed somebody else doesn't. So never assume what you need and want and falls within your range of acceptable behavior is the same as anyone else's. But just because somebody doesn't respond in the same way that we think we would, doesn't mean anything necessarily. So we need to stop putting meaning to words or actions when we're not sure that that is actually the meaning attached to it. Basically, we need to stop reading into things that aren't there. How do we do that? if I stop reading into things that aren't there. We all have quirky things. So, you know the saying, people in glass houses? Well, we all have glass houses. So who are we to judge? But never assume somebody is operating in the same way that you are. Never assume that they're thinking the same thoughts, thinking the same thoughts about the situation. And this goes for other people's reactions too. So if somebody has a reaction that you find surprising, whether it's they become very upset or they act as if it's nothing and you think it is, whatever the case is, if they're having a different reaction than you are, that means that they're looking at it from a different perspective than you are. So take a minute and say, what perspective are they looking at this from if it's not mine? Because obviously they're not seeing the situation the same way I am. So take a look at how are they looking at it? Work to understand their perspective, because obviously it's different. It's about empathy and understanding other people's experiences. Now, this isn't pie in the sky, everyone is wonderful, but here's the thing. I believe that most people are trying to be the best person that they can be. Now, I think that there are exceptions to that, but I think overwhelmingly, the majority of people walking around this earth are trying to be good people. So I don't think that the majority of people are out to get you or to make life more difficult for you. So if somebody's not doing something the way that you think they should, it's probably not because they are trying to take advantage of you or think badly of you or whatever it is. It probably has nothing to do with you. They're just doing the best that they can in that moment. No one's perfect. Not me, not you, not anybody. We all make mistakes. But also, sometimes we make mistakes in the eyes of someone else that we don't even realize we're making. So if somebody's doing that for you, don't assume you know what's going on. Ask them, talk, communicate.